Welcome to the Man Up God's Way podcast, a show that dives into the real, raw, and relevant issues for men and their faith, life, and community. Now, your host, Jody Burkeen.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is another Man Up Monday or Man Up God's Way podcast. We're so excited for you to be here. We are really excited about the guest that we have here tonight. I've got my host with me, Mr. Fregosa. Fregosa, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. It's glad to be back.
Welcome back from vacation.
Quick minute. Yeah, so I've been in California for 3 weeks. That was probably one of the longest stints I did.
Good.
Yeah, family.
Went back
friends,
home, huh?
A little bit of work.
Right.
Went back home, yeah. Got some stuff done and back in the swing of things now, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, glad you're back. We missed you over the last couple of weeks. It doesn't run the same without you, that's for sure.
Probably smoother.
No, I don't have anybody to pick on, you know. Well, I've got Ben most of the time, but Ben's not here tonight, so we do get to pick on him quite a bit. So, but yeah, I'm really excited. It's been a crazy couple weeks. Just had some crazy stuff going on in life in general, and with family. Got the kids. I've got 12-year-old twins, and I'm 54 years old. So that keeps me busy, man. I keep telling people they're either going to kill me or keep me young, and I'm good with either one. So they are busy all over the place. Sports. They're at camp this week. We sent them to this really awesome camp called Camp Sharon here in Missouri. And they're there for the week, and so my wife and I actually have the house to ourselves. So
nice change of pace.
Yes,
I'm sure.
It is. She got home today. She cleans a couple of houses, and she got home today. And I was like, "Well, guess what?" I said, "You got the house to yourself tonight." And she's like, "Thank God!" Like she's
all get out.
She's like, plop on the couch, turned on the TV. Nobody's gonna talk to her, so she'll enjoy that evening. So. But, yeah, folks, I'm really excited about our guest tonight. We have been playing, I guess you could play internet tag and Zoom tag and podcast tag for the last few weeks. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. This is Greg Munck, and we're excited to have you here.
Oh, man, it's my privilege to be hanging out with you guys tonight, man.
Well,
thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your patience to get you on here for the last couple of weeks. I ended up having a vacation. You had a vacation, and we had some other stuff going on. It was just kind of crazy. I don't think Satan wants us to have this conversation. I think that's all it was.
I bet. No, he doesn't.
Well, good. Well, before we get into your new book that is out, Greg, I'd really like to just hear your story. The audience, give the audience kind of an idea of who you are. I always like to think that people, the more that they know you, the more that they will want to get to know you and respect you, and kind of dive into the stuff that you're promoting here, as well as just you as a pastor and an author, and even on your website it calls you a jarhead. So we'd love to love to hear those stories as well. So why don't you start off and just give us a little bit of your testimony? You can go as deep as you want, and it's all free for all here on the Man Up God's Way podcast.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, I got a crazy story, and that's what led me to write the book. And the book's kind of done in 3 parts. I'm a survivor, I'm a war fighter, and a peacemaker. And so I'll just start with the survivor part. I had a crazy childhood. Not like a lot of people have dysfunctional families, and mine was pretty hardcore dysfunction. I had a dad who was an alcoholic, and I was born in Ohio, Cleveland, in the Parma area, and we moved out here in 1974. And so we moved out here. My dad had a job, and he never stopped partying, I guess, from college. He played football at Wake Forest, got hurt, and then finished out at Wake Forest there, and then got a job and moved his boys. I have 2 brothers, two older brothers, Derek and Rob. And then, so it was 3 boys, and we had a house there in Orange County, California, moved out by Huntington Beach. It's called Fountain Valley. And grew up there, and at first it was, pretty normal, and California life. My mom loves the beach and went to the beach a lot. And But then my dad was an alcoholic, and drinking caused a lot of issues in his life personally, and then drunk driving started to take place. And then he started to get, 1 drunk driving, 5 drunk driving. Then he's, 6, 8, 10 drunk driving. His total drunk drivings were 14. He got 14 DUIs.
Holy cow!
And that's just the start. And then
wow.
So the first person I ever hit was my dad, so he wouldn't drive drunk. And a lot of the times he was pretty cordial, but then there was times when he'd get really drunk and he wanted to drive. He always wanted to drive, obviously. And one time I'm like, Dad, you can't drive, and took his keys and he's like, I think you're tough, in my face, and then he pushes me, and then I push him, and he hits me, and then I just roundhouse him, knock him out, drag him to his bed. I'm like 12, 13 at this age. And
wow.
But just the craziness of that. And then my dad got into smoking pot, and then he got into cocaine, then he got into freebasing, and then meth. And then he started, he's hanging out with the guys that are involved with that. He had a buddy that he was running drugs with, as a drug dealer guy. And one time he stole a Porsche from him.
Oh my
and
goodness.
So he was at home. Yeah. He stole a Porsche from him. And so I was sleeping at night. This is when I was younger even than when I first hit him. I was probably 10, 11. And I was just in sleeping. I didn't know there was a guy on the couch there to protect the family. He had a shotgun. My dad had a 357 by his bedside. My mom was out of town back east. And I get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, make my way to the bathroom. And I guess I made too much noise. I startled the guy on the couch. He comes over, shotgun, cocks it to the side of the head. I pissed my pants. It turned, and the light comes on, and he's like, "Hey, just go back to bed." I go back to bed and shut my door and put my little toy box in front of it, like it's gonna do anything. And I'm in bed the whole night, just cannot sleep. And then the sunlight comes up, and I finally fall asleep. And I remember waking up that morning and walking out, and then my dad and him obviously talked, and like they're shaking their head at me like I'm some kind of tough kid. But that kind of thing just scarred me, and it just
wow.
The story gets worse from there. It's like it's just like I just recounting these stories, just telling you guys. It's just like it's unbelievable the level of pain associated with them, and then the fear that caused me as a kid, and then when I was 13, my dad took me to his friend's place where he was staying, and he's like, "Hey, I want you to come with me to go pick up something." And so I go with him, and they're in the car, and we drive to Costa Mesa somewhere and pull over, and we're waiting like 15 minutes. It's all dark and lights are out, and then a car pulls up, and he gets out and picks up some kind of package, puts it under his seat when he gets back in. Even at that age, I'm like, okay, this is like total, he's picking up some drugs or something. And I'm like, hey, Dad, what's that? He's like, oh, these are just some plans, some business plans. And I'm like, oh, you had to put them under the seat, and like not saying anything, but saying something kind of thing. And so we drive to this place in Font Valley called Los Caballeros, and where his drug dealing partner had a place, and I would go there with them and just jump off the high dive and hang out by myself and do all sorts of crazy stuff. But at this time, I was sitting on the patio just hanging out, and then they're all in partying and a bunch of girls, and it's not my mom obviously, and they're doing cocaine, and then all of a sudden knock on the window, the sliding glass door opening. He's like, hey, why don't you come in here and hang out with us? So I'm over there, I'm in 7th grade, 13, and he's like, hey, why don't you do some cocaine with us? And I'm like, I don't know, Dad. At that time it was like, say no to drugs was big. And I was born in 70. So I was, 83, this was 83. And then I'm like, and then they're kind of, cheering me on, these adults. And I do lines with my dad, and all these people. And
Jeez.
For the first time I did cocaine, was with my dad there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so it's like the parent child relationship was just totally fractured at this point, and and then my mom, and then so he, as you know, I could talk to you guys for hours about the details, but as he got worse, he started getting arrested more. He started spending time more away from home. So as his addiction grew, his times away would grow. So it kind of coincided. So he would be gone for the weekend, come back, and rehabilitate on the couch, and then be gone again for 4 days. And so 2 days, 4 days, 5 days, a week gone. Just kind of in and out. We couldn't pay for rent, so we would get evicted. We got evicted 4 times, and my mom started working full time at the May Company in children's department. She became a manager there, working there, and just to support us with food and everything. And so as I got, and then my brother, Derek, went to college, and my brother Rob was older. And as I just got older, then I got into high school, and my life became about football and my friends. My dad was gone. My mom was working, total latchkey kid, and doing my own thing, writing my own notes, registering myself for school, working, paying for myself. I just not I couldn't rely on my parents. Wow. I didn't have that reliability on my parents, and so my friends became my life. And then I would spend a lot of time at friends' houses and eat there, and they would be happy to let me stay at their house. They knew something was wrong, but I never really talked about it. I never talked about what was going on. I never talked about this. I just was doing my thing. But people knew home wasn't the best, and so my friends' families took me in. They were awesome, and it was great. But just I would come home at times, and my dad would be there. And then one time I walk in, and there's all these. We're from Cleveland, right? So we had the living room that nobody sits in, right?
Right, exactly. So, all plastic.
I don't know if you had those, but
old gold with plastic on it and dark wood. Yeah.
And so we walked in. That was for company when
right,
when people would just show up, right?
Yeah,
and so
it had the candy had the candy dish with the candies that had solidified to the side of the candy dish.
Yeah. That's for company. That's for company. So, anyway,
right.
So I walk in, and man, this living room, it looks like a crack house, like just food and boxes, and just, I don't know. I was only gone like a day, I think it was. And then just all these people that in the house that can't speak English, and, and they're just shooting up heroin now. So my dad progressed from, coke, freebasing, smoking cocaine, and then, doing meth, and then heroin. And so they're shooting up heroin, and I'm just like, I fly off the handle. Now I'm a sophomore, I think, in high school, and I just go off, I'm like, get the hell out of my house, chicken unknown. They're like, no habla English. I'm like, no habla my, whatever.
Right.
I didn't grow up in a Christian home at all. We didn't go to church, and so. And every adjective and verb before the Marine Corps was a cuss word. So, right. Getting everyone out of this house. And then my dad just comes up a scene out of, the Big Lebowski, like, hey man, what's up?
Right.
Chill out, bro. And my dad just sit here, and I put him down in the seat. He's just totally lit up on heroin. And I get everyone out of the house and just have this conversation with my dad, and, the parent-child conversation that we've had so many times. And I just said, Dad, you got to stop this, man. What are you doing? And then I can't tell you how many drunk or drug-induced, apologies, and I'll stop, and it'll never happen again. And, it's just, I describe it as when you're a kid of addiction, a kid who grows up with an addicted parent.
Right.
It's just it's a constant, them breaking trust in some way with you, and then you forgiving them, and I call it, you would stick your arms out to them, and you would embrace them, and they would cut your arms off, and it just happened over and over again. Then it got to a point where my heart started getting hard, and I started hating my dad. I mean, I'm not talking I don't like you. It was, I hate you, and I and then. I was the youngest of the boys, and so we would get subpoenas. People would come to the house with the sheriff. And I remember one time I was even younger. I was probably 7 or 8. A subpoena came to the door. My dad and I were the only ones in the house, and he comes to me right away, and he comes to me and he goes, "Hey, I'm not here. Whatever you say, I'm not here." And I opened the door, and there's a sheriff there, and with the they're serving a subpoena with another guy, and so like, is your dad here? And I'm like, and I don't say anything. He's like, son, it's okay to tell us, is your father here? And I kind of opened the door and just motioned them in. And my dad's runs out the back. He's trying to climb over the fence. We have like a fence. Part of it is on a corner of like a back of a 7-Eleven shopping center, kind of thing. The back alley. And
right, exactly.
He's trying to escape, and there's a cop sitting right there waiting for him. And he's like defeated, jumps back over the wall. The guys come in, they arrest him. He's walking back, and I'm by the front door still watching all this. And then my dad looks at me and just goes, "Man, you're a piece of shit."
Oh,
and I can't believe you let him in.
What a mess.
And then the cops are like, "Oh no, Mr. Munck, you're the piece of," just like, but those kind of moments like just really, really impact you,
right.
as a kid. And then it went on. Then there was another time where he wanted me to stay home from school to do coke with him, and I did a line with him. And those are the only 2 times I ever did cocaine. And then so, another one, the thing of all those things, the ones that stuck with me the worst though are probably the least graphic ones, where it was he missed my 12th, 11th, my 11th, 12th, and 13th birthdays. And, it seems so, you say that, and it's like, it's such a, birthdays are such a big deal as a kid.
Right.
And when I talk, the time I get emotional and all that other stuff I told you, it's usually this time. It's crazy to think about. Like, but I remember missing him. I'm missing my 11th birthday. And then he comes in all drunk, and, it's just like whiskey and bourbon. I can't stand it to this day. I just because of that smell.
Just that smell.
And he would just, come in my bed apologizing, and then he would wake up and then take me to breakfast and take me to the family fun center to play arcade games and a go-kart. And then, I'd be happy from, just buying my affection.
Buying your love. Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Yeah. And so then I would, I'd forgive him. And then I remember the next year, like, it can't happen again. Sure enough, misses it, climbs into bed. Well, the third year, like, we're going to Disneyland, we're in Disney right here in, Orange County. So we're going to Disneyland, and okay, I'm going to be by at 10. So I remember I'm riding my bike up and down the block, waiting for my dad. And then I remember my mom telling me, like, he'll be here at 12. And then I'm riding my bike, and so excited. And then he'll be here at 3. And he never showed up, man. My mom, I remember, like, trying to do presents and that. But those things just, like, they scar you. Like,
right.
They make your heart so callous.
Well, I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice now. It's still like it was yesterday.
Oh my gosh, it's just unbelievable. And like I tell you, I almost hate talking about the birthdays. And of all the things I tell you, it's like it's the birthdays that got me right. Most. And then we get phone. My mom would say, "Hey, can you go pick up your dad?" And my brothers would be like, "All right, Greg, come with us." And like, "What are we doing?" And I was like 12. They're older. Like Derek was 14, 15. My brother Rob is like 5, 6 years older. He was 18. So we're gonna go pick up Dad. And then we get to this place called the Hop in Irvine, owned by the Righteous Brothers. And like my dad be hammered drunk. They'd call us. And then my brother's like, "Hey, go get him." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "We'll give you a rainbow sherbet ice cream if you go get him." I remember going into the hop, getting my dad, and like he's, "Oh, it's my son," and walking him out to the car. And then, as long as we got rainbow sherbet ice cream, I was happy. And then, then there's the times where it just progressed, where like when I was more in high school and he'd be drunk, and just playing games with him, right? Like he would I'd hear him try to get his keys, and he's hammered, and then I would, and I'd run out the back door, run around the side yard, come out the front, and he'd open the door, and I'd be right there. I'm like, "Sorry, Pops, you're not driving tonight." He's like, he's defeated, like, "Everywhere I go, you're right there. I can't believe it." And then we try to go out the back door around the side, and I would come out the front and come to the side, and hear him try to mess with the gate, and just these little things, and I would just laugh at, and he would open the door finally and be like, "Oh my gosh, everywhere I go, you're right there." But it's just the tragedy of my, my growing up. And then how that translated to me, like moving on to high school, is I just had a super independent attitude towards life, and then at one time he had become a Christian. And so for 30 days he was sober.
Oh, wow.
And then we went to church. We went to church every Sunday. And then 30 days later, obviously, again, it was at that 12, 13 mark. 30 days later, he was back doing drugs. And then for me, that's like, oh, God's just for weak people. Instead of shooting up heroin, he's shooting up God. And, that didn't do it. So now he's just next in the next drug. And so I had this like twisted attitude towards religion. And then like, it's just for weak people,
right,
who can't help me, help themselves. So I would make fun of Christians. But I had a friend that would take me to church all the time. His dad was Mark. His name is Mark Davis. His dad was Gene Davis, Olympic wrestler in the '76 Olympics, and he was part of Athletes in Action and ran the wrestling program there, and was on U.S. Wrestling and all this stuff. But they would take me to church, and I went because I wanted to hang out. They always would go to pizza afterwards, and they would get sometimes they let my buddy Mark and I have a large pizza to ourselves, and what a big deal that was. And then I'd go on to the youth events and be the kid in the all-nighters in the back of the bus trying to kiss girls and, causing trouble. And it just was, then I got to high school and football became my life, really. I love football. I love the discipline and the challenge and the push. And even though life was chaotic at home, I knew I had, like, school is, I couldn't do drugs, and I couldn't be like my dad, and I had to do something different. So, but I drank. My life at that time became partying with alcohol, football, and girls. Right, that was my whole life. And then I was dating a girl from another high school, and she got pregnant. And I remember it was my sophomore year. I was 15, and I was lifting with my buddies. And my friend Reza, he tried to do this thing where, I don't know if you guys ever lifted, but bench pressing. I was bench pressing, and then there's a little, your legs are kind of separated. There's a bench between your legs.
Right.
Well, you would kind of drop a curl bar and say, "Hey, look," and it looks like it's going to hit your private parts.
Right.
But it doesn't. It hits the bench. Well, my knucklehead friend didn't measure it right, and he drops it, and it just goes right on the family jewels, right? And I drop the weight, and I'm just like, oh, and I snap. I have one of these moments in my book. I describe them more, where it's like the pit of Sheol. It's like this evilness that is awakened. That I went crazy, and it was way beyond. That was a presenting issue of something more in me that was going on, and no one can console me. My best friends, my buddies, they're my family. I was just thinking so much of the coach kind of is like realizes there's something more to it and takes me into the equipment room, and I start talking to him, and I'm just like, hey, what's going on, Greg? And I'm like, stupid Reza, did this, and it's like, no, what's going on? Realizing there's more going on, and I'm just like, well, coach, man, I just got to tell you, man, I don't know if I want to live anymore, and I just share with him for the first time. For the first time in my life, I share with somebody else outside of my family what's really going on at home. And just like, my dad's an alcoholic, he's a drug addict, I can't afford, I have to work as I bus at Claim Jumper and to buy food, and we've been evicted, and my girlfriend's pregnant, and I don't want to live anymore, man. And he's just like, I can't believe all that's going on in your life. I never would have known, Greg, by how hard you work. Because I was telling you, football was my thing. And
well, that was your avenue of escape.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I excelled at it too. Like that, my junior and senior year especially. And so I have this moment where, I admit to this coach, and he's just really awesome. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing for food?" And I go, my mom does the best she can, but I eat peanut butter sandwiches and a cup of soup and Hormel chili and mac and cheese. And he's like, Well, let me give you. So all the change in the Coke machines is the football. So he gives me this big bag of like quarters to go buy. Hey, go buy food for yourself. And I remember I went to Pup and Taco. It's like Taco Bell out here right after. It was such a big deal, but just a small little. No, but that was my life, and I was a pretty nice guy. I like to get along with people. I wasn't super, but I got in a lot of fights, not because I would start them. My friends, I had some idiot friends that had big mouths, and I started getting bigger. I was just, I'm 6'3", and then as a junior, I was 205, and then 215, 220 as a senior. So I was pretty big dude, and liked to fight and enjoyed that.
Right.
But never really got mad until somebody would like connect with me or hit me, and then I get really upset.
Right.
things wouldn't end well for the other people. So that was my life. And then at that progression about the stories I was telling you, and some of them were all over the place in timing, but it just was hard. And I really, as my dad started getting worse, he was gone more, then it became months. He was gone a month, and he'd come back. Then he was gone 2 months, and then at one time he left, and he just didn't come back, and we didn't know where he was. And so that was my senior. That was my senior year. He was gone a lot, and then so how the Marine Corps kind of plays into all this is I was watching. Me and my buddies were watching Full Metal Jacket, that movie.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And my friend had just watched, was talking to a recruiter, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go by and talk to my recruiter. You want to come with me?" And I went there, and we would just watch Full Metal Jacket. That's a hardcore movie.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Make you think twice about joining. It's funny.
This episode is sponsored by Ordinary Angels. This new movie is based on a remarkable true story. Ordinary Angels centers on Sharon, played by Hilary Swank, a fierce but struggling hairdresser in small-town Kentucky who discovers a renewed sense of purpose when she meets Ed, played by Alan Richson, a widower working hard to make ends meet for his 2 daughters. With his youngest daughter waiting for a liver transplant, Sharon sets her mind to helping the family and will move mountains to do it. What unfolds is the inspiring tale of faith, everyday miracles, and ordinary angels. Check out the trailer at ordinaryangels.movie and look for it in theaters in October.
I have a very similar story, but mine was Heartbreak Ridge. Yeah, I saw Heartbreak Ridge and went and joined.
and I remember, like, who in their right mind would watch Full Metal Jacket and join the Marine Corps? It's like you gotta be out of your mind. But for whatever reason, we get to the recruiter, and I'm like, "Hey, is there any wars going on?" He's like, "No, there's nothing going on." And so I joined the Marine Corps that spring of my senior year, and we joined the buddy program. I come home and tell my mom, and she's like, "What the? Why were you crazy?" I'm like, "My mom, I just got to do something different," and then we were supposed to go in the Marine Corps in March of '89, and so I graduated in '88, that June of '88, and so that fall I wanted to play football, so I went to Orange Coast College, a local community college here, and I played football there. And my buddy Adam, who I joined with, couldn't wait. So he didn't want to wait for the buddy program in March. So he went in October, and I was alone. Then my guys I mentioned, my dad at that time, he was gone, and he didn't come back. And what I didn't know at that time is he was out in the streets of Santa Ana. At first, for 3 months, he was running drugs, just shooting, selling heroin and running drugs. And then another 3 months, he just was a homeless person, bum, in the back of El Pollo Loco in Santa Ana. Just shooting up heroin, getting food out of trash cans. That's what is his life, and that's where it ultimately took him. And so I left for the Marine Corps in March of '89, and I was going to graduate from the Marine Corps boot camp in June, and he missed my graduation from Marine Corps boot camp. And then my brother Rob I missed the wedding because it was a week before I got out of the boot camp, so I missed my dad's first son got married, and he wasn't there because he was on the streets.
Golly.
And so again, at this point, I didn't care for the man at all, and I hated him. I wanted nothing to do with him. So I go to Marine Corps boot camp, and I am in Marine Corps boot camp. If you carry the guide on, if you're the platoon leader, they call you the guide.
Right.
And so you're the guide. So hence the name of my book is called The Guide. And there's another play on that word later on. But I was the guide in Marine Corps boot camp, and we carried that guide on flag everywhere. And I excelled at boot camp. I loved it, man. It was like Hell Week in football, right? Like Hell Week, where the way it used to be in football, where it's like actually 2 weeks, and you felt like you wanted to die and you couldn't walk,
Right.
I don't think they can do that anymore.
No, we did 2 days for 2 weeks, man. It was hell. I have to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I was the kind of guy who was looking for a challenge, right? And so I love boot camp, and so right away, because I was tall, I was a squad leader, and then later on, right away, I became the guide of the platoon leader of the boot camp, and I had a blast in boot camp, and I have a bunch of stories that I won't kind of get into here, but it was just great, and I had a great time. And there is one story though that kind of marked me. It was third phase of boot camp. We're getting ready to graduate, and we're marching on the parade deck like Marines do. You mentioned it before when you started. Marines march a lot. And,
yes, they do, and they look good doing it too.
And I thought we were looking good, but the drill instructors had another plan, and so we were going to the pit, and the pit was this 50-yard sand pit of the finest sand made by Marines for the past 100 years. It's it was crazy how fine this sounds. So we get in there, and I stick my flag in the sand, and we are doing bends and thrusts and jumping jacks and bends, like burpees nowadays they call them, and CrossFit, and we're working, and then there's a big cloud after 40 minutes we stop, and then drill instructor grabs the flag, and this represents a new life for me. This represents a new start for me.
Right.
It was a big deal. That's my flag. I carry it with me wherever I go. It sits by my bed at night, when I go to bed, and then the drill instructor used to laugh that my hand was on the flag at night when I was sleeping. I mean, this represents a lot. There's a lot to it, and then he picks up the flag, and he's like, "You are the worst platoon," and other expletives you can imagine that drill instructor would say. And then he breaks the guide on, and he throws it on the ground. And so I'm just like, I'm hook, line, and sinker a jarhead right at this point. I'm a Marine, and I lunge for the flag. He's like, "As you were, guide." And then he goes, "In fact, you love the guide on so much. Why don't you lay down by it?" And so he lays out the flag, and I put my head by it. And he tells the whole platoon to line up. And he goes, "I want everyone in the platoon to spit on the flag." And I'm looking at guys. I'm sitting on the flag, and I'm looking at guys with these, if eyes could kill you, they would laser beam them. I would have killed them. And sure enough, guys, most of the platoon, spitting on the flag. So except for some of the squad leaders and a couple other guys, everyone was spitting on the flag. They walked by, spit all over me, all over the flag. All of a sudden, the whole platoon is lined up in front of us. The 3 DIs, 2 on my shoulders. They stand me up, and then they tell me, "Spit on the flag, guide." And I'm like, "No, sir." And they're like, "Spit on the flag, guide." "No, sir." And then they put their knees in the back of my knees, push me to the ground, pushing my head down. And they're like, "Spit on the flag, guide." I'm like, "No, sir." I'm screaming, and they're like, "I will court-martial your, what?" Right. And I will kick you back. You spit on that flag. It's a direct order. You do not disobey your commanding officer. And then I'm like, "No, sir, I won't spit on the flag." And then they pick me up like, "That's why you're guide." And that's why you're guide. And it was this moment where it was
that is awesome.
I was standing up for what I knew wasn't right, and I remember holding up that flag. I picked up the pieces and holding it up, and I'm like, "Guys, this is our family. This is our country. This represents, this is who we are, and we are platoon 2025. This is a motivating moment in my life for the drill instructors and for me that really signified like this new start for me, and I really wanted it, and so
awesome.
Boot camp was great, but I was stationed at Camp Pendleton, and that's not far from where I lived. And so at this time, since my dad wasn't around, my mom moved back east to Ohio, after the wedding, after my brother's wedding. He moved back to Ohio, and no word from my dad. And our house we don't have a home there in Fountain Valley anymore. And so I'm just staying with friends. And,
Wow.
and you know, I'm in the Marine Corps, and then on weekends go out, hang out with my friends. And, I'm dancing one night, and then there's a hot brunette. I know Kimberly, she's dancing too. And I know her through just other friends and through high school, but we never dated. And, we were both, my best friend, we were both dating best friends. So my best friend, Kenny, was dating off and on her best friend, Pam. And so they were always together, and we wound up meeting one night, and she took me home, and I was trying to hit on her, and she had nothing to do with it. She had a boyfriend at the time. And next thing you know, we go on a trip all together, up to the mountains, and I'm hanging out with her all weekend, trying to make my moves on her, and it's not working. and then we on the way back home, we finally have a moment where we kiss each other, and then I go back to the barracks that night. I remember, and I just remember she had an off and on boyfriend. I just said, "Hey, if you ever want to go out, let me know." And that was 90 February of 90. It was Valentine's Day, and I remember she called the barracks. No one ever called the barracks for me because I was always, out in Fountain Valley. And I remember they said, "Hey, this girl named Kimberly called." And then I remember I said, "Oh, she's hooked. I'm going to marry this girl." And I call her. We go to Valentine's. We go to Valentine's Day. And then ever since that moment, it just was, I fell in love. She became my rock, my family, everything. And she had an experience. Her family went to church every Sunday. And, but when I met her, she was not, walking with the Lord. And so we were, active sexually. And so that was February. It's July time frame. And she goes, Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, the Jesus Revolution film just came out. Yeah. So that's right. It's right by our house.
Wow.
And so Chuck's this church, and then Greg Laurie would speak there on Monday night. And so she goes to a Bible study on Monday night and recommits her life to Christ, and comes back, and she's like, "We can't have sex anymore." I'm like, "What? What are you talking about? Like whoa, what do you mean we can't have sex anymore?
Ruining everything."
This is what? Like I was not, and I was such a scumbag at the time, right? Just like I remember during those times, like, "Hey, let's go to church," and there was a small church in Huntington Beach that we would go to on Sunday nights. And I'm like, I remember telling her, "Hey," like trying to hook up with her, like, "Hey, God can wait." I remember, like, just reflecting on my life now, saying those words, I just like, oh God, what a douchebag, And but she, and then I couldn't stay at her house anymore, and I was just on base, and she wasn't breaking up with me, but it was like, hey, I need that. She was getting herself right with the Lord, and that was priority, and she was trying to, she wanted me to be a part of her life, but she was resetting her perspective. And so at that same time, my brother Rob, my oldest brother Rob, went to a funeral and felt like the pastor at the funeral was talking right to him, and he committed his life. He became a Christian.
Wow.
And then, and so the Harvest Crusade, just the first Harvest Crusade after Pacific Amphitheater was happening, Chuck Smith wanted to do a summer harvest nights, and then so he had Greg speak at the Harvest Crusade. And it was that, and my brother Rob goes, "Hey, this, there's the Harvest Crusades happening, at this time." And then, so right at that time in August, the Gulf War just started. Right. So Iraq invaded Kuwait, and my unit was slotted to go. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I just meet the girl of my dreams, and now I'm going to war. Thanks God. And, I didn't have a relationship with God, but I just remember being so angry.
Right.
Like, I could die over there. Then I started searching. I started asking questions. And then here, Kimberly recommits her life. And then my brother Rob becomes a Christian. He's like, "Hey, there's this guy, Greg Laurie. He's going to be teaching." And then Kimberly's like, "Oh, that's the guy on Monday nights. You're going to love him, Greg." And I'm like, so the fear of death actually got me to say yes. So I went to I went to the Harvest Crusade, and it was Sunday through Thursday night. And then they ended it with a baptism at Pirates Cove there in Corona del Mar on Saturday. So I go Monday night, and it's a cool music and great message. And that night though, it's like I see all these people go down, and I just, at that time, it was more like I was more prideful that night. Like
Wow.
I don't need this. You don't need this, Greg. This is not the answer. You don't need this. And so I just fought it, right? And I didn't go down. And then afterwards, they were totally bummed, like Kimberly and my brother, and they're like, and we go get pie or something. They're like, "Hey, do you want to go tomorrow night?" And something was drawing me, and I said yes. So I went back Tuesday night, and then Tuesday night I'm sitting there, same thing, music, great message, all these people come forward, and I'm just like, oh my God, it was my insecurity, it was my I'm not good enough, like, oh my God, all the things I've done wrong, how can God forgive me? There's no way. And so I didn't go down. Like, man, talk about thick-headed. And then the next night, same thing. They invite me. I say, yes, we go. It's the third night. And this time it's kind of my intellect, And so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I don't go down. I'm fighting. I'm wrestling with God big time. And then another night it was, why would you allow me to have such a father like this? God, why? The intellect night was me just saying, hey, there's all these, how about the pygmy in Africa? And, all these excuses I was just giving out. And then that last night, the excuse was just like, how could you allow this pain to happen in my life? When I would cry out to it, I would as a kid. I remember writing in my journal. It was profane, but it was to God. And I remember crying out to God as a kid just to help my dad to be normal and to help him. And it just never happened. And so I was just carrying all this burden. And then Thursday night came. It was the last night. And man, Greg gave a powerful message. I remember him saying, just like nights before, it's not about religion. It's about a relationship. And God wants to have one with you. And that totally resonated with me because I wasn't a big religion guy. I believed in a relationship, and all the things I've heard up to that point, I knew I respected Jesus. And he goes, hey, remember that Jesus in the manger that we all love at Christmas? He grew up, and he paid a debt that he didn't know for you, for the sin that you committed, and it just, everything came full circle that night. And I just remember all these people going forward, and there was a one call, like the last call of the night. I'm just weeping before the Lord, and I just stand up.
Praise God.
I just stand up in the middle of the aisle, and then Kimberly looks at me and goes, "Do you want me to go with you?" And I said, "No, I need to do this on my own." And I kind of I'm in an aisle, like just thousands of people have come forward, and I remember just this day yesterday, it's like, Lord, if you can help me stop doing the things I know are wrong, I want to be your man, God. And I go, can you take this anger away, God, please. Take this pain away. And it's just like yesterday. I'm feeling it like it was yesterday. I don't want to. I'm so tired of hating my father. And then I remember saying, God, can you please don't let me down, God, please, because everyone let me down in my life. And that was the bottom line. Every night that I was there, the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then there that Thursday, all the excuses, my pride, my insecurity, my own sin, my intellect. Every single one of those things all those things could be wrapped up into one excuse. And it was I was so afraid that God was going to let me down like everyone else. And could I really count on God? Could I really count on him? And then I was saved hardcore, guys.
Praise God.
It was like, so I was saved so hard like that. I didn't know what that meant to be born again. It's so fun. And then, afterwards, anyway, they give me a Bible, and I'm walking up, and I'm just like, I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders just to release that. And in the book, I call it surrender. I just surrendered, man. I tapped out, and so many guys I know are just like me. Even now, I talk to guys in my ministry, and it's just like I'm just like them, I was a little more hard-headed than them. It took me a little more time, but every excuse you could think of, I had.
Yeah, exactly.
I had pain and suffering. I had trauma. I had all these things that I could blame and just be an excuse for being a continued deadbeat. But and I remember the next day, a friend came over, and Buddy Kenny, and he's like, "Hey, I heard you're like born again now." And I said this. I go, "No, I'm not born again. I just decided to stop living for myself and start living for God. And but it's so true, because that's exactly what happened, and that's what it means to be born again.
Right.
It means that you die to that old self, and you have this new life in Christ. And the old, it's not spiritual birth. It's not a birth by water. It's a spiritual birth. And I was born again, and it was it was awesome. And then so here I was saved. Kimberly recommitted her life, and then I'm ready. I'm getting ready to go to the Gulf War now. My unit's going. I say goodbye to her. We say goodbye. I remember that first time we said goodbye.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to see you again. And it was just like, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And then it was so heart wrenching leaving, but then we didn't leave that day, and I wound up saying goodbye to her like 4 or 5 times before we finally left.
You and I have so much the same story, because that's exactly what happened to me too. We had the 24-hour, no contact calls. They'd call you up, and then you'd have to be ready for it. And I was at Fort Riley, Kansas, with the Big Red One, and I did that 3 or 4 times with my wife. The exact same thing, saying goodbye. And then finally, it was just like, back then they didn't have cell phones and everything, so you had to do the calling tree. Did you guys do that as well? Like, you'd get a call, and you'd have to call the guy that you're supposed to call, and you just keep calling down that. And end up showing up. But there was something that you said a while ago I wanted to kind of touch base on. You said that when you were walking down the aisle, you asked God not to let you down. And I think so many times, especially with men, is that they view God the way that their father treated them. And, unfortunately for a lot of men, it hasn't always been good. Like, if you have a heavy-handed father, you expect God to be heavy-handed every time you sin. Or if you had a father that lets you do anything, you think God will let you do anything as well. And a lot of times we get that backwards, and that God is always loving, that God is always just, and no matter what I do, there will be consequences. As a Christian, there's always consequences to your sin, but there's not always judgment to your sin. And we got to realize that. And I think too many men, tend to look at God as they did their growing up in their childhood.
Yeah, or we look at God as a genie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
God's some kind of genie that's supposed to grant me my wishes, and when He doesn't grant me my wishes, well, then there is no God.
Right.
It's like, gosh, and God's not, God's not a crutch. He's a life support system, and you cannot make it through life without Him.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's what I've come to learn. All that pain I had before, all the excuses I had, man, it was just incredible. And so I wound up saying goodbye to Kimberly, and we wound up then leaving not on plane. We're going to go by ship, so out of San Diego. So we have a date, December 1st. We're going to go. So I wind up saying goodbye to Kimberly. I remember that day. She's touring the ship, and then she gets off. And the week before that, we were a mess. Either she was a mess or I was a mess. Just like I'm going to war. I might not see you again, and then trying to encourage each other in this fear, right? The fear that was just taking hold of us. And I remember being on the ship, saying goodbye. So she's on the dock, and I'm at a position on the ship where when a ship leaves a harbor for any type of deal, all the sailors and the Marines, they sit on the bow. They sit around the ship. So they're on the edge of the ship, and they're around the whole thing. And all the ships go out, and then there's all these old veterans with boats on the harbor, and they're cheering American flags, and people going crazy. And it's an incredibly motivating, patriotic scene. And I remember standing there looking at Kimberly, and I tell you what, man, sure enough, guys, like I heard the Lord say to me, Greg, you're going to be okay. And for the first time in my life, I felt assurance. And all that fear that week, just God took it away, and I can't explain it. It's just like those times in my life when I knew Kimberly was the girl I was supposed to marry. Right. I just knew, like, I had this peace, this assurance that I've never felt before. Very similar to when I said yes to Jesus about my pain and my suffering. It was the same way there. I felt this assurance. And then I went to the Gulf War, and that we stopped in kind of the Reader's Digest on that is we stopped in Hawaii on the way there, stopped in Philippines, and I was still working out. I started reading the whole New Testament, but I was raw in my faith, and got in a couple fights in the Philippines with some guys. I was trying to call home, and it turned into this crazy situation. I won't go down that rabbit hole right now, and then wound up going from there, from the Philippines, going to the Gulf of Oman, and we did a massive operation called Operation Sea Soldier. It was the largest operation since the Korean War, and it was three armadas of ships and 30,000 men. We did a beach landing on Oman, and that was pretty amazing to be a part of, and being in a landing craft, and it was super publicized because that was part of the Schwarzkopf left hook plan. They wanted to keep regiments on the Kuwaiti beach. So they televised this big beach landing, and then, Marines are famous for beach landings. So I was part of that group that was going to do the fake out and not do a beach landing. But we didn't even know we were going to do that yet. We didn't know as Marines that we weren't going to do that. We just knew we were doing this operation to get ready for it. So we did that operation in Oman, and then this was a couple days before the ground war, actually. And so we make our way up to Saudi Arabia, and then we dock in Saudi Arabia, and then we unload everyone the day before the ground war. And so I was of all things in the Marine Corps, I was an 01. So I was going to be an 0311 Security Forces, which is like embassy guard.
Right.
When I joined the Marine Corps. But when I was the guide of the platoon, the drill instructors came to me like, "Hey, Greg, you can pick any MOS you want because you're the guide." And I'm like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Well, I'm happy with embassy duty." He's like, "No, you don't want to do that. You want to go intelligence or 01 because you can rank up faster, and it's going to be better for your career. You can always go to a specialized soldier unit, later." And I'm like, "Okay." So I wind up applying for intel, but I somehow got screwed up, and I was an 01. So I was an admin. But what happened was before we left Camp Pendleton, we had two big groups go over to the Gulf War already on airplanes. So they were there in Saudi Arabia, and I was formed with a third MEU, and we came from Camp Lejeune, we came from Okinawa, it was the most diverse USMC unit ever put together, and we all left on the ship. And so we make our way there, and so because of that, I was cross-trained in intel. I was cross-trained as a nuclear, biological, chemical warfare map reader, based on the agent and based on the temperature and the wind direction and the climate. I could tell you what an agent would be in an area and where it would go to.
Right.
So I was attached to RLT 5, part of 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines headquarters, and so I was right in the thick of. I was with the unit that was right in it, because I had the map reading skills, and I would do all the orders. I would have a top secret clearance, and so I would put the skiffs together for confidential, secret, or top secret billings. And then when I was on ship, and then I was NBC trained on ground, so I was a map reader with headquarters, 2-5. So we go ashore the night before the morning of the ground war, and our job is to go clear the Al Wafar forest, and it's not really a forest; it's a desert, but they call it that. And so we moved as fast as the vehicles could move, and we had an interpreter with us, and the big issue was prisoners of war. We had to process so many prisoners of war on our way, and it wasn't long before we got control of an area, but we still had to do clearing operations in this forest area because there was some units that didn't know that the war was really over, and so we had to clear it. And I was with a unit I was in a Humvee with a convoy, and we were making our way through Al Wafar and forest, and going through broken up Amtraks with dead bodies, and just clearing operations. And we got some mortar fire at one time. And I was in the back of the convoy, and we were pretty spread apart. And so me and my lieutenant get out, and we were looking at the map, and we're kind of arguing where we're at. And I'm the map guy because of my NBC stuff. and I kind of check fire on where we're supposed to be, and 2 Cobras and 2 Apaches come in and just level this side of where these guys are doing mortar fire on us, it was so loud. And I'm kind of skipping over just how impactful.
Right, exactly. That's all right.
How loud,
right?
How loud it was. And so after that, when they kind of just lit up this area, and then we went and scoped it out, and there was just body parts everywhere where these guys were, and we come back and we're there 2 more days, and then just 700 oil wells burning, the mist of the oil wells just everywhere, and we called it living the suck, and it was just crazy. It was just a crazy time, and being in combat, like the best way to describe it is that I describe it as being in the championship game of any sport that you're playing, and then that feeling you get when you drive by an accident or see something like tragic, that feeling you get, those 2 feelings mixed together 100% of the time, like full adrenaline, full fear, kind of just together. And we did that. We had some other our unit as a whole up front had some other encounters and return fire, and we would engage the enemy, but we cleared it within 2 days. And then it just became then we had prisoners of war where we would go, we had a couple guys pass away, and being an admin, I did graves and registration as well. So if someone dies in the unit, you help process the body, and the Iraqis really didn't have a plan to pick up their dead. So we would get prisoners of war, get parties together, and then we would go help them go pick up the dead, which was a lot, and match body parts and the whole thing. And it just those are the images that really are seared into my mind from combat. And so we complete the Iraq war. It was fast, but we're there from that. I think it was the 24th of March I can't remember the exact date the ground war started, but we were there till March 6th in country. And
the air war started in January, February. Yeah,
and then the ground war was and the ground war was like February 20th or 24th or something like that. Yeah, and then it ended like 4 days later, but we still were in country, and I never took my flak jacket off the whole time I was there.
I can imagine. Yeah, exactly.
Slept under the Hummer, and so we go back on ship, and then we are there. We were the last since we got there in January. We were the last sitting force. We got there right before the Gulf War started. We were the last to leave, and so everyone came home and they had celebrations. We were there in the Gulf War, but sometime in March 15th, I can't remember the exact date. They brought the whole RLT-5 that was there on my ship out on the flight deck of I was on the USS Juno, which is it's a well-decked ship. It has a well deck, and it has a helicopter port on the back, so a Harrier can land there, or helicopters, and then they can ballast, means put water into the back of the ship, and it sinks, so landing craft can come in and out of it. So that's what kind of ship I was on, and so we were all on the flight, this landing pad, and I got combat promoted to corporal because of my actions. With the lieutenant put me in for combat corporal for those,
awesome.
Basically, checking for fire, and
that's awesome.
And it's there's a lot of people that did a lot more than I did, but I just was a part of it. So so now it's we're there in the Gulf area, and we all want to go home. And it's May time frame now, and it's in the end of April. A typhoon, super cyclone, hits the country of Bangladesh, and it kills 150,000 people and 1 million cattle.
Yeah,
and we're just getting ready to leave. So we're going back the same way we came on ship, and we're going to stop in the Philippines, stop in Hawaii, and get home. So on the way home, they kind of get on the comm and they say, hey, there's been a typhoon. On the way back, we're going to stop and give aid to the Bangladesh people. And, we weren't too excited about it at the time, to be honest, because we want to go home, right? But then when we got there 2 weeks after that happened, and there was 10 miles out, there was brown water. And that's kind of unheard of,
Yeah.
you know, like a couple miles out, you know, you see brown water, or a mile out, or, you know, but 10 miles out, brown water still after 2 weeks. And then there was these sandbars, like miles out, where there'd be whole families sitting on like a 10 by 10 spot of sand, or some of the sandbars, they were kind of holding up their kids, and then the mom and dad would switch places being in the water because it was like knee high water. And so and then they've been there for 2 weeks, you know, when we got there. And that was just tragic. And then we would load up our landing craft and take helicopters, and we took support and aid to the Bangladesh people. But going in the landing craft, going in there, you would see just as like on the shore, still 2 weeks later, bodies and animals and children and, you know, chickens, and just all washing on shore, you know.
Wow,
and
holy cow.
it was just so brutal. And just after 2 weeks, the smell, and but being there, helping the people, with the contrast between being in combat, getting rid of, you know, the Iraqis who invaded Kuwait, and then being there in Bangladesh, you know, helping people. You know, it's like the saying, Marines can be your greatest friends or your worst nightmare.
Right.
And so we were there helping these people, and they were so thankful that they called us angels from the sea. So we were there 2 weeks helping them, you know, just get life back in order. And it's like, I think it's in the top 6 or 7 like typhoons, hurricanes in the world. At least in the top 10. Yeah. It was horrible.
Wow.
And and so we did that. But then after that, we were, you know, it was called, I got a humanitarian service medal for being a part of that. It was called Operation Sea Angel. That's what they actually called it in the books. So it's pretty cool that they called it that when the Bangladesh people were so grateful. And then, so anyway, I make it to Hawaii, make it to Camp Pendleton, and we go get out and go get on our landing craft and make it to Camp Pendleton. And then we get in cattle cars, and the actual cattle cars, and they take us to Camp Pendleton Air Station, where all our family and friends are there to welcome us. And I get asked to carry the flag, the Marine Corps flag for our unit. So there's 5,000 Marines, man, and we're marching down. I haven't seen anybody yet. We're marching down the runway, and man, we're singing the Marine Corps hymn. And dude,
that's awesome.
It was so powerful. I can't even express to you the feeling of being home and marching and singing that song. And then we make a right flank into the crowd that is just a sea of people going crazy. And we all get in formation, and there's a CO saying some final words to everybody. I can't even hear what he's saying. I just want to be done.
Right.
But I'm carrying, I have this flag harness and this flag with me. I'm holding it. And then I just remember sitting there, flashing back to the time when I left on the ship, and that assurance that God gave me. And then at that moment, just a flashback of everything that happened to me on that war float, and then in country in Kuwait, and then just boom, then I'm back here, I'm alive, and I'm going to see Kimberly. Then they yell dismissed, and I get to see Kimberly, and I hug her. It's like in a movie, you know, like twirl her around and kiss her, and just like, I can't believe I'm home. And then kind of fast forward, and a couple weeks later, we're in marriage counseling. And I remember Dan Pentano, the pastor, he's like, hey, I don't care what you've done before, but from this moment forward, I want you to commit your lives to to be sexually pure before your wedding day. And I was ready at that time. You know, that guy who was making fun of it just a year before.
Right.
You know, now I'm like, I read the New Testament over in the Gulf War, and God had been moving in my heart and life, and I was ready for that commitment. And so that was, that was July of 91 now. And, July of 90. And we were going to get married in February. So 7 months, we made a commitment, and we made it. And then I remember in that same meeting, Dan's like, hey, Greg, why don't you come be a counselor up at camp? And I'm like, dude, there's no way. I mean, I don't know enough with the Bible. I might cuss at the kids, man. There's no way. He's like, and he goes,
get off the shed.
Hey. Yeah. And it's so funny because he goes, hey, Greg, the only reason any of us are worthy is because of the blood of Jesus. So why don't you come? And I did. I came in, and they stuck me. It was the Church of the Nazarene, and it was like the Southern California. I can't remember what it was called. Anaheim District. I can't remember what it was. LA District Church of the Nazarene camp, and so I went, and they stuck me with all these inner city kids from Long Beach and Maywood and Compton, and so here's this white boy with all these Hispanic and black kids, and I'm still in the Marine Corps, and so I got my Marine Corps pack, and they heard I was a combat veteran, and they slept with my eyes open. All these lies that
Right.
all these myths.
Right.
And it's like, but I ran that cabin. They were flowing some serious attitude, right? And I ran that sucker like a platoon. I put a guy, a platoon leader in charge, and if they messed up, I'd pull them out. We were doing jumping jacks and snow dirt angels in the dirt, and I would have them walk around trees, and it was just I'm just laughing because I knew nothing, right? I'm just like, I never went to camp as a kid. I had no concept of it, so I just get learning as I go. And I remember that there was this black kid and white kid that would throw racist remarks to each other. And then I remember I was coming back, and I told them to knock it off. And I remember I was coming back from like a counselor meeting, and these kids are fighting, and then just fully just like all the white kids saying the racist words, and the black kids saying them cast for what all this stuff, and I remember I'm like, they're junior hires, right? Like 7th, 8th graders. I remember picking them up by the back of the shirt, like running as fast as I can. They can't even keep up with me, right? And I get them to the side of the cabin, and I pick them up and I throw them against the cabin. And I'm like, enough of this racist crap, we're here to serve Jesus, like I'm just laughing at it. And like they're at Bug Eyes, right? Here's Counselor Munck, like throwing these kids up against the wall, and like we're here to it's not the place for this racist crap. We're here for Jesus, And I put it down. Like next time you fight, you're gonna have to fight me. And I don't know. I'm doing the best I can, right? And so I'm laughing because those kids became friends, right? Those two men became friends, and my cabin, man, it was the greatest week of my life, man. I just get emotional thinking about it because you know what? Their problem was my problem. We all had the same problem.
Right.
They had fathers at home or mothers that were dysfunctional.
Wow.
They were addicted. They were alcoholics. They were drug addicts. And it didn't matter our race. It didn't matter addiction doesn't care about what race you are or how much money you have or how well off you are, or how poor you are. It kills everything in its path, and it destroys. And so that was our common bond, our brokenness, our trauma, and I got to share. And I remember Dan, he goes, "Hey, will you give your testimony, Greg?" And I'm like, "Dude, like, come on, man! Like, I don't." He said, "No, just tell your story. Just talk to them like you would talk to me." And I'm like, "Okay." And so, I remember it was the junior hires, and I'm telling them my story like I'm telling you guys. Like some of the things that happened to me as a kid, and it's just you could have. I even said the S word, I think. But you could hear. How junior hires can be.
Right. Exactly.
Man,
yeah.
They make you want to. They were laughing. They were laughing. They weren't laughing. They weren't moving around. Right. They weren't talking to each other. Like they were just like listening what was going on. And I remember telling them, I'm like, "Hey, can you pray for me because I hate my father and I don't know where he is right now." Oh no, I'm sorry. At that time he was in jail. I kind of skipped over that. My dad ultimately wound up doing 6 years in jail.
Wow.
So he was in jail at the time. And so I remember telling him, like, I know, can you pray for me? Because I'm having a hard time forgiving my father, but I know through Jesus that I'll be able to forgive my dad. And so I go to that camp. The kids are calling me all year long. Can you be my counselor again? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And I feel this call to youth ministry. And so, my buddy asked me to do a Wednesday night Bible study at a church, this Church of the Nazarene in Garden Grove. And I said yes to it. And there's like 6 kids there, and he goes, just put in this video and then ask, and then tell them your story. Kind of like that, like total on the fly ministry. And then I do that, and then I have a blast. He's like, hey, will you do it next week? And I come back and I do it next week. And then like a month later, the pastor meets with me and goes, hey, the kids really like you, and would you mind doing this every Wednesday? And then can you lead Sunday school on Sundays too? And I'm like, sure. And so I just say yes. Like, I don't know anything, right? And I just kind of say yes and make myself available. And then God starts, working in me. And then he goes, hey, I start getting into ministry. I won't go down another story, but then my dad does a 2 years. He gets 6-year sentence, and because it's not nothing was a felon, it was a violent. It wasn't a violent crimes. He good behavior got out in 2 years.
Oh, good.
And so he was out by camp that next year, right? But what's funny, my mom calls me up in that spring, and he calls me up. My mom calls me up and goes, hey, can you go pick up your dad? And I go, can you ask one of the other boys? And no, they won't pick him up. Can you pick him up? And then can you just do it for me? My mom's like, just do it for me, please. And so I'm like, all right, Mom. So I drive down to, he served time in Orange County Jail, part of his sentence, because he had crime. He had stuff in both, felonies in both. So then he was down at El Cajon Jail. And so I go down to El Cajon, pick him up, and then we're driving back, and I'm really not excited about it. I don't trust my dad. I don't have a relationship with my dad. I'm not really happy to see him, and I'm really angry about all the issues he caused my family. But, I have this beautiful girl who encourages me to think the best about people and then this new faith. And so we're driving back, and then my dad goes, hey, I committed my life to Christ in jail.
Holy cow.
Like, yeah. And then I'm like, but, because of my past with him, right? Because we went to church at one time, I didn't believe it, right? I'm like, okay, Dad. Yeah, totally. Like, there's no way. Like,
I'll be the judge of that.
Yes, yeah, totally. And so but sure enough, we start talking. He goes, hey, he got a job at being the night manager at a motel in Santa Ana, right back where he was. And I thought for sure, I can't tell you how many times this guy tried to get sober, right?
Right.
And so I just thought for sure he was going to go back. And then, but sure enough, 6 months, he's sober. A year, he's sober. And then about 2 years in, we start meeting. We start talking and going to lunch. And then I would sit there and go, Dad, why would you let me do cocaine with you? And he would just cry, and just weep and say, I'm so sorry, Gray. Would you forgive me? I was just, and then I go, and I would,
he did find go, hey, Jesus after all. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wow. And then he would go, I'd say, hey, that one day, Joe was there protecting the family, and like the shotgun went to my head, and he's like, and did you know that happened? He's like, yeah, he told me, and I thought you were so brave. And like, we just weep and like realize the totality of all his stuff. And like, you remember that one time, the birthdays so we spent like another year, a 2-year process of us just kind of meeting, and gradually I started to have love for my dad again.
Yeah, just mending those wounds.
Yeah.
Dang, that just gave me chills.
And
that just gave me chills.
I started to love my dad. And sure enough, man, he was a different person. And he was in recovery, and it just was insane. And he wasn't going back. And then he started sponsoring guys, and he started speaking at AA events, and he started speaking at, I think, and then we would give a testimony together, talking about, we did it like third person. There once was a boy, and I share all the things I kind of share with you. There once was a dad who did this and this and this, and then we kind of would meet right in the testimony. We kind of would meet in the middle. And it just was a tremendous, I can't believe, what happened there. And then Kimber and I get married, and my mom, after 2 years of him being home, my dad feels he's in a spot where he's strong enough to bring my mom home. They get a place in Aliso Viejo. My mom comes back from Ohio. They're together. and they're still together. I would say they're still together, but my mom just passed away in March. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and then my dad was sick in the hospital for 8 months and almost died too. But anyway, they were together till till my mom's passing, and it's just a miracle. And then I start having children. And I get out of the Marine Corps and I get a job at Q-Logic Corporation, this great semiconductor job. And I first worked for a friend, but then I get a job at the semiconductor company, and I become the Asia Pacific Regional Manager, doing really well. Then I start that Garden Grove Church. I become the youth pastor at that church. Then at camp, I start every year. First, I'm a counselor, and then I start doing fun time, and then I'm a speaker one year. And then I'm doing athletics, and then I become the director of that camp at that Nazarene camp. And it's just. And then I start going to Bible school at night, and just this, my family is growing. I'm doing semiconductor sales for this company called Q-Logic. God's providing in just incredible ways, and then I get an opportunity to go to full-time ministry. It's a long story, but a guy I met at a thing. I met my dad and I took. My dad took me to we're going to Promise Keeper. So, my mom comes back. My brother Rob gets saved. My brother Derek gets saved at Celebrate Recovery, and so my whole family becomes Christian.
Holy cow, dude.
And this broken family, this broken family who's that, and then it's just incredible what God does. And I start, and then we were going to Promise Keepers as sons and a dad, but one year they weren't meeting, and so my dad goes, "Hey, let's go to this men's retreat," and the guy who was speaking, his name was JP Jones. And he said in that message, he goes, "Hey, all of us need to have a Timothy and a Paul, right. Timothys that were mentoring. And then I had a bunch of Timothys because I was in youth ministry. And then we all need Pauls. And I didn't really have a lot of Pauls. I had some friends that were farther along in the journey that were like a Paul to me, but we're counterparts. And we build into each other, but I really didn't have a Paul. And I wrote JP's name down of someone who I thought I met him. He was he played football like me. He was a jock, and he was an adjunct professor at Biola, and just kind of a real guy. And I thought, that's a guy I think I could. So I wrote his name down, and I do a year of ministry. I've been doing ministry 4 years now at Garden Grove. Then I do 4 years at this place called Rancho Santa Margarita, at another church called the Family Church. Mm-hmm. And God's shaping me. I get my BA in biblical studies, and I'm doing really well at Q-Logic, making really good money. As a Asia Pacific Regional Manager. God's just blessing me on all the fronts. And then I want to take a break from youth ministry because I have 5 kids. I have Q-Logic. And all my free time has been for ministry, and I wanted to take a break. And so we start going to this Coast Hills church where my dad's going to now, and that guy JP's at, and he knows my background in ministry and asked me to do this event, paintball event or something like that for men's ministry. Right. And I do it. And then all of a sudden, Kimberly and I were going to go. I've been to Japan now, that was over a 10-year period, 50 times. Wow! And Kimberly was going with me for the first time, and JP meets with me at a Barnes and Noble here in Aliso Viejo and goes, "Hey, Greg, I know your ministry background, and we're looking for this associate pastor of men's ministries, and it's a big church. I was at a small Nazarene church. This is a big church. I'm thinking, there's no way that they're interested in me and." Yeah, get somebody from a bigger church to fill that role, right? Right. And then JP goes, "No, I want you to come on as an associate men's pastor. And what would it take to do that?" And it was so funny because at that time, it's a big church, and they offered me $65,000, dollars. It's funny that's good money for California. Yeah, it's good money. But I was making, that year I made 150 in commission, 150 in sales. I was making $300,000 a year, right, doing semiconductors, and so. I'm like, oh man, and I remember he asked me that, and I just start crying. I'm just in tears because I'm like, you got the wrong guy, JP. I'm so raw, and and then he's like, no, I want you. But Kimberly and I say all that. Kimberly and I fly to Japan, and I remember we took a day. We were there 2 weeks together. She was with me, and I got to show what I do there. And we're in a hotel room for half a morning, and we get a poster board and we write like all the good things, and all the positive things, and all the reasons why we do this decision of should we go. I go in full-time ministry, and I write all these positive things. There's so many, time with family, minister, just like the list went on and on. Like it was like 20 deep, and there was one on the negative, and it was financial, right? And I remember looking at that and knowing that God called me to full-time ministry. And so we decided there on that trip. And if Kimberly wasn't for it, I could have gone. I was a tent maker my whole time in youth ministry. I could have stayed a tent maker helping them out. But I knew that God was calling me to full-time ministry. And so I said yes. And I remember, like, my boss he was a believer at Q Logic. He's like, "Are you sure, Greg?" Like, my best friends that are believers, they're like, "You have a really good job, man." Right. And I did. I had a great job. They're like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And I'm like, "Gosh." And then I have big faith, but I always have regret. Like when I'm a few months in,
right.
I have buyer's remorse. Like, was this the right decision?
Well, I'm sitting here listening. Yeah. I'm pretty sure God's calling me to sell semiconductors.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, sales is what I do. Yeah. I feel the Holy Spirit leaning me in that direction. Yeah. I'll DM.
Yeah, yeah. It was just it was just as crazy, and so, but even like to be at that spot to make that decision, right? And then God, I just knew. So, and then it took me. Long story short, so I started there at Coast Hills Church with JP in October of 2001, and then I go to it was 2001, and then about a year later, I'm still I'm trying to replace myself, and I have to replace myself with 4 people, like 2 for distribution side and 2 for the OEM side. So I don't really get technical on that, but I wind up staying 2 more years, there. So it wasn't until July of 2003 I finally said to Q Logic, I have to go. And then they gave me 6 months severance. They were super gracious. They were fully supportive. This a Fortune 500 company being like that, it's not always the case. And they really didn't want to lose me. And but July of 2003, I went to full-time ministry. And then JP and I was there. That was 2003. And then in 2005, there was some changes at Coast Hills. And then JP and I left, and we started Crossline Church in February of 2005. And we met at a high school here. And now, we moved to a campus 5 years later of a church that was dwindling. And then we took over the campus. It's this 30-acre campus with a lake and 5 buildings. We took it over to lease, and then it became our church. So we have a church of about there's about 1,200 to 1,400 on a Sunday that come to our church, and I was the executive pastor. He's the senior pastor now. I'm the lead pastor, and he's the senior pastor. And and I had 5 kids, and it's just crazy. That's a whole nother story. I don't know.
Praise God, brother.
Yeah. My son is an actor. If you have kids, you might know the show iCarly.
Yeah.
My son was Gibby on iCarly. And so,
no kidding.
And so that's a whole, I guess, another topic we could talk about one day. But being my son, Gibby on iCarly, and my youngest was on the show. He was Guppy, and he was on that for 7 years. And then he just was on the Goldbergs for the past 10 years. My son Noah Munck. Yeah. And so,
wow, dude, what a blessed life, man.
Yeah. So it's crazy. And then, now it's like I have a church, and then, and then I just would be telling all these stories that I've kind of, some of what I told you, I've been telling you stories, speaking at men's retreats, and on a Sunday, I would tell these stories. And then my daughter, Taylor, was like, "Yeah, you should write all these stories down." And like, you know what? And so I started writing all these stories down, and just what I told you, so there's the survivor part, the war fighting and the peacemaking, just what God's done in my life. And the book, the guide, was a result. I started writing it in 2020, and it's just been amazing, that journey. But in that journey, it's funny, like I wasn't really part of I was a combat veteran, but never a part of the veteran community. Right. And so writing the book, and just recently last year, really gave me a heart to step into this suicide epidemic that we have amongst our active duty
Amen.
and veteran community.
Yes, exactly.
And so God has equipped me with, I've been in ministry all this time, but now I'm starting I work with a group called SOF Missions. I'm the West Coast ambassador, where we recommend, I went to this clinic. It's a 5-day clinic for veterans, and it's paid for completely. You fly out to Florida and Tampa, and they do psychological, physical, spiritual, and social. And it's a Christian group, but they do a clinic every month, and they get 10 veterans at a time, and they pay for everything. And it was life changing. It was amazing. And then the thing I was realizing is, of all the things I've been telling you, I really didn't have any battle buddies in my life that I would share my combat issues with.
Right.
And I just didn't do it. And I went to that clinic, and I can't believe I missed the camaraderie so much, like just that instant bond you have when you talk to somebody that's been in the crap, been in the thick of it. Yeah. And I really didn't have friends in my life, battle buddies in my life, until recently. Now I'm part of the Marine Corps League, which is like a American Legion kind of deal. And I'm speaking at Camp Pendleton. I go to Camp Pendleton once a month, and I'm working with veterans, and I recommend people to this clinic. So if you any of your listeners that are veterans, if you want to, you probably are like me. You don't think you deserve it, but go to the clinic, and it's covered, everything. They cover your flight, they cover the clinic, the food, your stay, and they provide care for you, and it's amazing. And so it's called SOF Missions, and you can reach out to me, and I can get you connected. So,
and you can reach Greg at gregmunck.net, and that's MUNCK, Munck. And you can check out it's at the, matter of fact, it's at the bottom of his website, and you can contact him if you need more information on that. It's a really good program. We're actually doing some praying and some searching right now to start something here in the St. Louis area. So I've got a guy who has it on his heart to do like a equestrian veterinarian kind of not veterinarian veteran. What does he call? I keep forgetting what he calls it. It's almost like just
equine care.
Equine care. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
You said equestrian for with horses?
Yeah, it's for horses. Yeah, exactly.
And then they work with the
vets. Work with the horses, and the vets work with the horses, and it's just kind of a calming effect that happens with them. And so
there's a foundation in California that does that.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them, but we're really looking forward to doing that too. It's awesome. The SOS would be a great program for a lot of people, like you said, especially for those who, unfortunately, the PTSD and the things that a lot of these guys are going through is not diagnosed early enough, and they think that they can work through it. And most of them end up working through it with alcohol and drugs and pills and everything else. And guys, there's so much more help out there, and it doesn't mean that you're less than. It just means that you just need help, and there's help out there to be had.
So true, man. Because that's my story. I when I got back from the Gulf War, I had Kimberly, and then I had this new relationship with Jesus. Right, it was this new thing, but still, I did what a lot of vets do. I never went back. I never talked to anybody I served with. I didn't have a tattoo, didn't have a sticker on my car. I never talked about what I did. It just wasn't a part of my existence. Because I didn't want to lead into it. And so years later, when I was starting to leak a little bit, even as a man of God, I realized, oh man, there's some stuff I need to deal with. And then I need to process. And it wasn't really to this year when I went to that clinic that I realized, that there's things that I need guys in my life to help process the things I went through and not just bury them, and exactly. God can take away all sin and pain, but there's also a time for us to talk about the things we went through and lean into it and not bury it.
Right. Do you know Jeremy Stallnecker?
No, I do not know him.
He's out of California too. He does. They have 32 camps throughout the United States, and it's no cost to the veterans, and so they triage them as they come in. And if there's a camp going on that weekend, they pick them up wherever they are, fly them out there, and put them in the camp. So there's
that's awesome.
There's a lot of good help out there, guys. So if you're listening to this, so make sure that you check out Greg's website, gregmunck.net, to check that out. He also has his book on there, which is called The Guide: Survival, Warfighting, and Peacemaking. And you can also, I'm assuming, is that on Amazon as well?
Yep, Amazon. I have an audio book too that's in my voice, and that just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's doing really well. Yeah,
you got a good voice too. That would work perfect for that. The audio book. That's good. So, well, man, you've got all your social media on there as well, and we'll tag people with all of our social media posts and stuff for you. And what an amazing story, Greg. I pray that God just continues to use you mightily and continues to just grow your church. And this book just flies off the shelves that they can't even keep it in stock, that it's just reaching more and more men who need to really just hear the story of people who've gone through what you have. And you had an opportunity to find Jesus, and you took it. And God has used you mightily in that. I think a lot of men need to hear that kind of story, because I think too many of us like to use our excuses to stay where we are, instead of saying, "Listen, there is a better way," and His name is Jesus.
Amen, man. So, and I appreciate you guys doing this podcast. I love the name "Man Up," because because in our society, the culture wants to sideline men and masculinity, and it's and then we need strong men. We need men who are dangerous with goodness. And who stand up for stuff. So I applaud what you guys are doing, and if God can use me, He can use anybody.
Amen. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Well, brother, it's been a blessing to have you on here. I pray that God cross our paths again, and that we can maybe we have you come out here and speak, and maybe you have me come out there and speak. I do men's conferences as well, and got a couple, actually 4 books that people can find on our website as well. So we'd love to love to partner with you, brother. So God bless, man. And it's been a pleasure. Tell your wife thank you so much for letting us have you for a couple hours, and we'll be praying for you.
Hey, God bless you guys.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
God bless, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org.